In the early 1900s, Russia was ruled by Tsar Nicholas II, who was an absolute monarch. While there was a parliament in Russia, it had no real power. Society was deeply divided, with nobles at the top, peasants at the bottom, and the middle class in between. Most people were peasants and lived in poverty. Many worked on farms and used outdated agricultural machines and methods. Industrialization was also lacking, causing the economy to struggle. The high cost of goods made life even harder for common people, leading to the spread of revolutionary ideas. When World War I began, Russia joined the war as they were the self-proclaimed protector of the Serbs, defending Serbia against Austria-Hungary. The Russian government believed its alliances would keep it strong. However, the war quickly turned into a disaster. In 1914, at the Battle of Tannenberg, Russian forces suffered a massive defeat due to poor planning and lack of supplies. While the Russian army was large, it was poorly trained and very badly equipped. As more men were drafted, farms and factories lost workers, leading to food shortages. This was a vicious cycle that ended up collapsing the Russian economy. Due to this, prices soared and hunger spread, making life unbearable for civilian peasants. World War I was not just a battle with many casualties, it was a long war of attrition. This was mainly due to trench warfare. Many soldiers didn't die from gunfire, but from disease, sickness, and starvation. Because of this, trench warfare made battles long and deadly. New weapons, such as machine guns and poison gas, only worsened the horrors. In 1915, Tsar Nicholas II made a horrible mistake by taking direct control of the army despite not being a skilled military leader. This caused him to lose public trust. Meanwhile, in the capital, a so-called holy man named Rasputin gained influence over the royal family by acting as a healer for the queen's son. His presence and power led to many protests and strikes. In February 1917, massive protests erupt, forcing Tsar Nicholas II to step down. A new provisional government took power, but it struggled to maintain control. Russia was still involved in World War I, and the people, tired of war and poverty, demanded change. The instability led to the October Revolution. During this, the Bolsheviks, led by Vladimir Lenin, seized power and promised peace, land, and bread to gain public support. The Bolsheviks immediately started dismantling the old order. Much of the private land was seized and redistributed to peasants, factories were overtaken by workers, and Russia began its transformation into a socialist state. Soon after, a brutal civil war erupted between the Bolsheviks' Red Army and the opposing White Army, led by old soldiers of the Tsar, monarchists, capitalists, and other anti-Bolshevik factions. The war brought even more suffering to Russia as famine, disease, and violence spread across the land. Eventually, the Bolsheviks crushed their enemies and secured power. In 1918, with their rule solidified, the Bolsheviks made a controversial move. They signed the Treaty of Brest-Litovsk, officially withdrawing from World War I. However, this came at a large price. Russia was forced to give up vast amounts of land. This included present-day Ukraine, Belarus, and the Baltic states. They had to give this to Germany and its allies. This loss further weakened Russia's international standing. Despite this, the Bolsheviks pressed forward with their new vision. In 1922, they restructured the fragmented remnants of the Russian Empire into a new state, the Soviet Union. The Soviet Union was a communist regime led by Lenin, and then they produced this banger. With Lenin as its leader, the Soviet Union embraced communism, aiming to build a society where the working class ruled. However, there were still challenges. Lenin died in 1924, and a power struggle emerged, ultimately leading to Joseph Stalin rising to power. Under Stalin, the Soviet Union industrialized rapidly, but at a great cost to human welfare. Forced labor camps, political purges, and widespread repression became defining aspects of Soviet rule. On the world stage, Russia's withdrawal from the war and its communist revolution led to deep distrust from Western nations. The Soviet government was excluded from the Treaty of Versailles, the very agreement that shaped the post-war world. While Britain, France, and the United States determined the fate of defeated nations, the Soviet Union was left out, further isolating it from global politics. Western powers viewed the new communist state as a threat, setting up the coming decades of tension. Despite its isolation, the Soviet Union focused on rebuilding itself under communist rule. Its revolutionary ideas spread worldwide, fueling future conflicts like the Cold War. Russia's experience in World War I and the revolutions that followed changed its course, transforming it from an old empire into a new communist state that would shape the 20th century.